What does the NFL community actually think about head coach Sean Payton? As a diehard Denver Broncos fan, I had hoped that the first move made by the Walter Penner ownership group was truly that they hired a rock star of a coach, but I heard rumblings from people saying that the Broncos actually wanted Harbaugh and he turned him down to go back to Michigan, or they wanted DeMeco Ryans and he went to the Houston Texans instead. So deep down, I hoped that he was the right choice, but I never really knew until I dug into it, and I have quotes from like the best coaches in the history of the NFL and some of the best players in the history of the NFL and current players on and on about what they actually think about Sean Payton. And I wanted to dive into those with us today. If you're new to the channel, I'm Ben, diehard Denver Broncos fan. Helps me out a lot as well if you like the Broncos, if you would like and subscribe. So starting back at his very upbringing as being one of the offensive coordinators for Bill Parcells, Bill Parcells is a underrated, quiet, incredible coach that not only did he win 2 Super Bowls, which puts him in a whole different stratosphere as in the history of coaching. He won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants, but his coaching tree is massive and has dudes like Bill Belichick, and we're going to look at his coaching tree here in a second. And in addition to winning those 2 championships with the Giants, he also turned around the Jets. He turned around the Dallas Cowboys. He turned around the New England Patriots, and really their dynasty is all credited to Bill Belichick, but that probably got its start with Bill Parcells. And Bill Parcells came out and said, Sean Payton is one of the most innovative minds in football, that he can adapt whatever he needs to do to meet the strengths of his players. And we saw that as Sean Payton got 60% more wins out of Russell Wilson than Nathaniel Hackett did. Nathaniel Hackett let Russell Wilson just, let Russ cook, and Sean Payton saw that that didn't work, and so he adapted a style, and he took the Denver Broncos from 5 wins to 8 wins, and truly in playoff contention up until the year ending. And so hearing a brilliant football mind like Bill Parcells say that he is the most innovative mind in football, like that's incredible. And again, you look at his coaching tree and you see dudes like Bill Belichick, you see just so many people, Sean Payton, Crennel, Saban, Mangini, McDaniels, Schwartz, all of these guys kind of being a part of that original Bill Parcells coaching tree. And so that is incredibly high praise for someone like that to say that. So what do other coaches saying about him? We see here that Dick Vermeil, who had the greatest show on turf there, said, to me, Andy Reid and Sean Payton are the offensive coaches of the decade. Period, full stop right there. And again, to be able to run the greatest show on turf and get that kind of production out of Kurt Warner, for him to glow about Sean Payton in that way, also a fantastic, fantastic sign. With this, when Sean Payton came to Denver, and they were asking like, hey, how's Sean Payton going to do with Russell Wilson? He said, if he can't fix Russell Wilson, it cannot be done. And I think Russell Wilson didn't run the system exactly like Sean Payton wanted to, which is why he moved on from him. But to me, that's just really, really high praise for someone like that who has had production as an NFL coach to come out and just say that with no qualms or hesitation is a very, very fantastic sign. So we're seeing 2 current head coaches who had crazy amounts of talent. And so let's look at what Sean Payton was able to get out of Russell Wilson that that Nathaniel Hackett was not able to get out of Russell Wilson. So first off, you remember one of the most memorable low points of my entire fandom was hearing the entire crowd at Mile High Invesco Field count down the play clock as it was expiring and delay game penalties. That did not happen whatsoever under Sean Payton's watch, and he was able to help Russell Wilson digest an even more complicated offense and not have those things. But if we take a look at just Russell Wilson's production this last year under Sean Payton versus the year before under Nathaniel Hackett, you see that obviously 60% more wins. We went from 5 wins under Hackett to 8 wins under Sean Payton. His overall quarterback rating was a 98 under Sean Payton, and it was an 84 under Nathaniel Hackett. 26 touchdowns thrown to 16 with Nathaniel Hackett, 8 interceptions to 11 interceptions with Hackett, and his completion percentage went up and his sacks went down. And even though Sean Payton hit the thing he was most upset about was how often his quarterbacks were sacked and what an outlier number that was in any Sean Payton offense, that, that's not how he had Teddy Bridgewater run it when he had him, or Jameis, or Drew Brees, obviously. And so seeing that even though Russell Wilson didn't hit the high bar that he has for quarterbacks, we just see he did do what Dick Vermeil said. Like if he can't fix Sean Payton, if he can't fix Russell Wilson, no one will. And I think Sean Payton really did fix him. So let's look at some other coaches and what they had to say about him. So Tony Dungy, again, does not have a reason to glow about him. He said this about him when Sean Payton was with Fox and Tony Dungy was with NBC, and usually there's not a lot of love lost between those two media organizations. And he came out and said that he thinks he's one of the top coaches in the entire NFL. His success is no accident and is a result of relentless work ethic and his passion for the game. So you're hearing, again, more and more really well-liked and well-respected coaches just saying fantastic things about him. And his players, likewise, in a very similar vein, just gush about Sean Payton. Obviously, Drew Brees, who the Chargers had just given up on and decided to move past, came out and said that Sean Payton has a brilliant football mind and is an incredible leader and sees the game differently than anyone else. And I think it's worth noting that when Drew Brees said this, it's not like he was playing for a clown show like Nathaniel Hackett. He played for another really well-liked coach in Marty Schottenheimer, who decided to move on from him. And my favorite story about that was Drew Brees running into Marty Schottenheimer right before the draft when they ended up drafting Phillip Rivers. And Drew Brees, who I don't picture as like a swearer or like a dude who has a potty mouth and needs to wash out his mouth with soap, he asked Marty, hey, who are we going to draft? And he's like, I think we might be drafting a quarterback. He said that is the biggest bleep mistake this organization will ever make. And they gave up on him, and Sean Payton has the ability to see talent and get the most out of talent, which should have us all crazy hype that he saw Bo Nix. And now that we're through OTAs and are just waiting on training camp, he's saying Bo Nix is exactly who we saw. And we're seeing that Sean Payton does have an ability to see talent and work on that. And so then let's look over here at dudes who've been covering the league for a very, very long time. And again, guys who don't have a reason to gush about someone who was on Fox News and someone who it's easy to dogpile on because of the entire Bountygate thing. That there was a while in the NFL where you weren't allowed to speak anything good about him because his name was tied to Bountygate. And so this is Peter King with Good Morning Football, and I think he's with NBC as well, and said Sean Payton is a future Hall of Fame coach. His ability to turn around teams and create high-powered offense is something that every team in the NFL envies. This is something, again, that Damani Leach, our new vice president of the business side of football, has echoed as well, saying people around the NFL are telling him how unique what we're doing in Denver is and how jealous other teams across the NFL are. And then hopping over here, Mike Florio said that, and this is the part that Drew Brees is the testament of, that Sean Payton has the ability and a knack for identifying talent and then maximizing it, and that his schemes are the most creative and effective in the entire league. Very high praise. Again, he doesn't have a reason to say that. Like, he's in a competitor's network there. And so hearing him say that, so what are some of those things that Sean Payton has seen, that knack for identifying talent that we are hoping rings true here with Bo Nix, hoping rings true with Jonah Ellis and Troy Franklin and so on and so forth? We heard in all the pre-draft stuff, Sean Payton just talking about how he and George Payton spent 5 hours just looking through the fifth round and who they wanted in the fifth round. So we know he puts in the work when it comes to drafting well. And so where have we seen some of those absolute steals and all that? I think the first one, and as we look at Vele and his ability to potentially be a future Marquez Colston, it is Marquez Colston being a no-name and drafted in the 7th round, and then at one point in time being the touchdown leader for the New Orleans Saints. And that's a fantastic example. There are not too many times that you find a 7th rounder who then goes on to help you win championships, help you win playoff games, and help you by making the Pro Bowl. You see the same thing, exact same thing. His ability to identify talent is what we see with Alvin Kamara, who is a fantasy football standout and just an absolute stud that he was able to get in the 3rd round when other running backs, he was something like the 10th running back selected in that round. And that's just a great example of him being able to identify talent. And then you see the same thing with the slant god himself, Thomas here and just his ability to find guys who aren't aren't first day draft picks and make amazing things out of them. Same thing, being able to see what he did with multiple players throughout his time with the Saints. And I think we're going to continue to see that this year in Denver. Now, the thing that I did not quite realize until I started doing research for this episode was just how, I knew obviously that Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints beat Peyton Manning in that Super Bowl. I remember it very, very clearly. And because of how Peyton had always owned us, I kind of wanted Peyton Manning to lose that Super Bowl. Just because I feel like he was the Broncos' daddy for a long time when he was with the Colts. Well, I didn't realize how bad the Saints had been historically. Like growing up as a Colorado kid, I knew they used to wear brown bags over their head, but I didn't know how remarkable it was for Sean Payton to win in New Orleans. Like it would honestly be like the Pelicans winning an NBA championship or the Rockies winning a World Series or something like that, that from their inception in 1967 until after I was born, they didn't have a single winning season, and most of their seasons were under 5 wins. So you're talking about, we've had a little bit of a drought here in Denver where we haven't scratched the playoffs in 8 years. Well, they didn't have a winning season for their first 20 years of existence. Their first playoff win came in 1987, or their first playoff appearance. They didn't win a playoff game from 1967 until the year 2000. And I just think of like the Detroit Lions. I'm living in Michigan now, and that Lions playoff game was electric because those people were so thirsty to have their team actually be good. And the Saints make the ineptitude of the Detroit Lions seem like they're the most brilliant team in football. Like, I can't believe that. So then you look, he was not part of that first win, but when he got there in 2006, he immediately turned them around. They went to a 10-6 win team, and then being in a NFC championship game in his first year in New Orleans, and then winning the Super Bowl against Peyton Manning just 3 years after getting there. And then, the time he was there, they were consistent contenders. They had that, they lost to the Seattle Seahawks. I remember the first Beastquake. I remember when Marshawn Lynch just could not be tackled. They were favored in that game going to Seattle, and somehow the Seattle Seahawks beat the New Orleans Saints. But you look at 9 playoff games won under Sean Payton when they had only won one other game in the entire history of the franchise without him. And I just think that is absolutely absurd. Next thing that I think it just really needs to be mentioned is if Sean Payton was a bad coach or people didn't like playing for him, he wouldn't, after taking an entire year off of football, then all of a sudden be a magnet and have people coming out of the woodwork to come back and play with him again and play for him again. And I think that's something that all the haters and stuff are like, oh, Sean Payton, he chewed out Russell Wilson on the sidelines. People don't like playing for him. Well, even after a year off of football, you have these dudes who've played in New Orleans who flock to him like they're going to a Taylor Swift concert. So currently, the Denver Broncos, and I think this number has actually gone up by 1 since I've grabbed this graphic, but 19 former New Orleans Saints players have come to join the Denver Broncos. And I just think that can't be understated, that that is one of the greatest signs of respect in my mind, is that they want to come here and play. And then you look at our free agents that we were able to snag this year, and what is the first thing that they said about why they came here? You look at Josh Reynolds, who the Detroit Lions were super mad, decided to go to Denver on a very similar offer, when it seems like Detroit has a ton of momentum, right? And Josh Reynolds said, hey, I've always wanted to play in a Sean Payton scheme. The Dan Campbell is part of Sean Payton's coaching tree. You see Dan Campbell gush about Sean Payton all the time as well, and so that's a great sign. But he came to Denver and chose to be here, even though we have a loaded wide receiver room. He chose to be here because of what Sean Payton's doing. And the same thing, John Franklin Myers, when the New York Jets said they were going to move on from him and said, go start exploring teams, tell us where you want to go, and we'll make the trade happen. He said the same thing, hey, I want to go play with Sean Payton. And then if you look at current players right now, I just heard on an awesome podcast on Jim Rome's podcast, he had our best player currently right now, Pat Surtain, who's the best cornerback in the league, and he was asking him about what he thought about Sean Payton, and he made all of these amazing comparisons between Sean Payton and Nick Saban. Again, they're both part of that same coaching tree. But even more importantly than that, he was just saying, the leadership we have on this team, you can't beat this leadership. Obviously, when you got Sean, great things are in your future. So when the best player on your team is saying, hey, we got a guy who reminds me a lot of the best coach in college football history, that's a fantastic thing. When you take two guys of that caliber and they understand what it takes to win and build that culture, the stage will be set. They know how to get their players dialed in and ready to go. And when you look at great coaches and what sets them apart, they know how to bring guys together. Sean Payton has a different aura about him. He knows how to win playoff games. He's won Super Bowls, and he knows how to get there. He's got the utmost confidence in this team. So I just am crazy encouraged after reading about what the NFL actually thinks about Sean Payton. There's even more reason in Denver to BO-Lieve.